All right, so thank you, everybody. We're really excited and happy to be here and to share some of our adventures that we have had in outreach. And we're really happy to have our community partners who are along with us to be part of the community. So, I'm Karen. Ooh, there we go. So aside from loving being a shelter vet, I really like being outside, hiking, riding my bike, walking the dog. So this is my husband Andre and I, and we started in Sault Ste. Marie. And this was where we finished up in Sudbury, which was just a brilliant bike ride. Not the kind of bike riding Gabrielle does. It was sort of sedate compared to you, but it was still fun for us.
And I'm Jade. I also work at the Toronto Humane Society. And I got really involved with our outreach clinics and stuff like that after Karen introduced them to me. I'd seen some of the outreach clinics. I'm from Alberta, and so we have outreach clinics there as well. And it's a very different atmosphere than the ones here, and so and I hike with my cat.
And kayak.
Oh yeah.
Oh, both of us? Yeah. Oh, problem. Okay. All right.
Is there a mic just over there?
Does it work? Yeah. Oh, good. I'm gonna stand over here then. I don't talk loud. Okay, so just to give folks an idea of what we're going to talk about, so we're going to start with community considerations and the power of partnerships. We're going to give some examples of animal housing and equipment. We'll touch on protocols and regulatory requirements, some administrative learnings. We do have resources, and I've got a handout for resources for folks if they're interested. And then Dr. Ann Sylvester has something she calls ILOs, or inadvertent learning opportunities, and we'd like to share some of those with you too. So one of the things was MASH. So Linda's like, what's a MASH clinic? And I'm like, I don't know, it's the TV show. So it is not Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. So when we use MASH, we mean Mobile Animal Sterilization Hospital. We're also going to talk about wellness clinics, and we're going to talk about community health. And how impactful it all is as a whole for improving health of communities. So how many folks here, I know some folks have done outreach, but can I just get a show of hands how many people are involved in outreach? Oh, so many. Okay, I can probably skip most of my slides then. So community considerations are really important. And we like to start just kind of by judging the love interest. So our community outreach has all been with First Nations communities, and it's something that we want to look at expanding on and looking to serve more local underserved communities, but we haven't got there yet. So that's all I have to talk about today is the work we've been doing with First Nations partners. So we like to start thinking about the level of interest and engagement in the community. So in order to be successful, you really need a strong community advocate. We've worked with volunteers in communities, and we worked with staff, and we find that there's a big difference. There's just so much work that needs to be done on the community end that it's an enormous undertaking for a volunteer. So we find that communities are much more successful when there is staff that are involved. So we have pictures of a couple of people here. So on the right is Janice in the gray. Janice was not able to join us today, but Laura Lee and Janice worked together in New Credit. And the bottom, the left in the blue is Lyle, who is with us today wearing gray today. So what are the needs of the community? So it's important to have some conversations to understand what the community identifies as their needs, so what they want and need, and then what are you capable of providing, and can you meet there? Thinking about location, so how do you get there? Do you drive? Do you fly? Do you take a ferry? How close is the nearest town? I don't think I've ever been on a clinic where there wasn't something that you wanted that you didn't have with you. And if it's far away, you can really struggle. What's your ability to continue to support clinics and support in between clinics? So to just go in once and do one clinic is, in my opinion, limited value. Are there other organizations already working in the community? So if there's multiple organizations working, that can lead to confusion, that can lead to poor sort of continuity of care. So I think that's something to be really thoughtful of. There are organizations that are really respectful and collaborative and partner, and there are also organizations that can be judgmental and can re-traumatize already traumatized communities. So if you're in a conversation with the community, have they had previous outreach? Why are they not working with their last partner? What worked for them? What didn't work for them? Just to kind of make sure you can move forward in a way that's productive for everybody. We really like starting with the wellness clinic first. It's a way to judge the level of community interest. to start building relationships and building trust, and also get a view of the venue and decide whether or not it's going to be suitable for providing a surgical clinic. So the community partners do a ton. So they find the venues for us and book the venues. They do all of the advertising. They do all of the scheduling of the appointments. They take prepayments. So we've sort of rejigged things over the years, and we have found that prepayments for us really dramatically decrease the no-show rate, and it helps make the clinic much more successful. Our community partners also know their community members well. So if there's people that need specific allowances made for them, they know that, they can identify them. And that helps us sort of staff more appropriately for the demand. They help us with check-in and with discharge. They'll often do follow-up calls or follow-up texts for patients the next day, and that can really help. So when folks come in and bring their animal, to be greeted by somebody they know is much nicer than to be greeted by one of us who they've maybe never met before if it's one of your first times in the community. They also supply a lot of non-medical stuff for us, so tables, chairs, garbage bins, lunch, which is amazing if you don't have to stop and procure food through the middle of the day. You can just keep going. And some places will also help with accommodations, which can really decrease the cost of putting on a clinic. Community spaces vary, so you can work in community centers, you can work in fire halls, in school gymnasiums, health centers, a whole gamut. And there's lots of things you think about. You want at least 1,000 square feet, but 2,000 square feet is probably better. You need reliable electricity, hot and cold running water, and an ambient temperature that's relatively controlled, so it's not too warm or too cold. We've worked in spots where the power's been a concern, so the autoclaves overloaded the breakers and kept throwing the breakers. Jade remembers one place, which I have forgotten, where the techs had to use the flashlight app on their phone for surgery. Linda's smiling when the power went out. So it's something to think about. We really like using the oxygen concentrators, but you need power for those, so having oxygen cylinders as a backup is really nice. You want to think about the flooring. We were in one place that was a strip mall that was going to be renovated, and we walked in and we saw the carpeting and were really concerned because the dogs are going to pee. But they were going to renovate it, and our community partners assured us they're going to rip out the carpeting, and it was not a problem when the dogs peed on it. What's the clinic space like? Can you separate the cats and dogs? Do you have enough space to separate the animals pre and post-op for recovery? The cats, and you just sort of get creative about where you can see them. So one of my favorite cat rooms is the accessible bathrooms. You've got a sink, you can close the door, you don't lose the cat. Those are really, really nice. We were at another spot, which you probably remember, where I was doing cats in the health center in between two doors, and then there was a set of stairs running down, and I didn't lose a cat, but it would have been really bad if I had lost a cat there. So you sort of work with what you have. How is your ability to set up flow? So for us here, you can see at the front there's some dog crates, so that's where animals are going to go before surgery and also to be recovered. In the back right-hand corner is the surgical prep area. Up on the stage was where we were doing surgery, and past through the exit sign is where we were able to hold cats separately from the dogs. Lighting you want to think about, and also accessibility. So how will community members be able to get there? Is it accessible for them? And what is your clinic? Is it a wellness clinic? Is it a surgical clinic? So you see, we use the same picture, Linda. So this was just a wellness clinic, so neither of these venues would have been suitable for surgery, but they worked out really well for wellness, particularly during COVID. So the one on the left was, I think, it's huge. It was like the Metro Convention Center inside. It was this enormous building, and it was so big that they were building little tiny houses inside this structure and driving around like full-size trucks and things. So we had a section of it out to the front. I thought I got a better picture of it, but if you see it along the chain link fence, there are those white boards. Those are like these really lightweight, flexible, sort of plastic bifolded things. You can pick them up and move them around. So they've been really awesome for just separating the dogs out. So if you get dogs in that are not used to being indoors, not used to being around other dogs, just providing that visual barrier and being able to move it around can be really helpful. The one on the right was a big garage, so the garage bay doors were open, so the ventilation was really, really nice, and that one worked for us. things happen, right? Like things that you don't expect happen will happen. They take a lot of time and a lot of energy to organize, way more than you think they will if you haven't done one before. And so we did a clinic in Beausoleil First Nations this June, but I started talking to Christina, our community partner there, back in 2020. So it was like 2 years of intermittent conversations. Allison hooked us up in the beginning. And there's just lots of little decisions to be made. Now they're on an island, and they were really, really, really nice. They found places for us to stay. They had a lovely community center, but to get there, you had to get there by ferry. So they had a car ferry that had been out of commission for quite some time, so it was in for repairs, that kind of thing. So instead they used a passenger ferry and a cargo ferry. So here's a picture of the cargo ferry there. But the cargo ferry had a flatter bottom, so it wasn't as stable, and you could only have one vehicle with no people. Like you could have a driver but nobody else. So the people had to go on the passenger ferry and the vehicles went on the cargo ferry. Unlike the car ferry, everything goes together. So as we're getting closer and closer to our date, well, the cargo ferry is going to be back online. No, it's not. And she'd be emailing me, and then I'd email all of our volunteers and staff, and it was just like this constantly changing ferry schedule. So in the end, we all got on the island, which was fantastic. And it was a beautiful day, but then it got windier and windier as the day went on. And nearing the end of the clinic, they tell us that they're going to be canceling all the rest of the cargo ferries after the next one because it's going to be unsafe. So there's a passenger ferry so people can get off the island, but their vehicles can't go off with them. So like suddenly they're dropping like flies, right? They're all like, really sorry, we gotta go. Everybody's jumping in their vehicles, taking off, and there's 4 of us sort of left standing, and we're like trying to see the last patients, and we're throwing all our stuff in our bins because we don't want to be stuck on the island either. And thankfully the last ferry was late, so we managed to get off, but I mean, like, I don't think we've really unpacked properly since it's still a mess when we came back from.
And that van was the last vehicle.
It was the last one. I was like dispensing medication to people down at the ferry docks. It was kind of crazy, but like that, like stuff happens, right? Stuff happens when you do outreach, and you sort of have to be prepared that it will not be smooth. Animal housing. So because they don't take place usually in animal care facilities, you need to be thinking about bringing your own carriers with you. It's really nice having sheets to cover the carriers because, again, that visual barrier, so it just helps the animals be a little bit calmer and a little bit quieter. So has anybody here ever had a cat brought to you in an unsafe or insecure way? Thank you. See, even students, right? Like it just starts right at the beginning. So not that this was insecure, but on the left, and you can't read it, and I'm really sorry, but it's awesome. It says, "I'm too fat for my carrier. Don't judge me." So different equipment. So equipment, it is, it's the same kind of equipment that we use in our regular clinics, but it just has to be compact, it has to be packable, and it has to be durable. So that's going to influence your choice for tables, for lights, for anesthetic machines, all that kind of stuff. And our head of facilities is a carpenter by training, so he made us this really, really beautiful box to put our autoclave in, so at least that we could safely transport it without being damaged. We use inhalation anesthetics for our clinics, so you want to have at least 2. One for your prep area, one for your surgery area. And again, we really like the oxygen concentrators. You can see it in the back left of that surgery area, but having the oxygen cylinders for backup is really nice. Tammy turned us onto this, and I think this is just the coolest little product, so that's why I threw it in here. So this is an anesthetic gas filter. So you can do passive scavenging, which means you could just run your pipe out through a window or out through a wall, but then you have to be able to be beside a window or a wall to do that. So this is nice because it just hooks right onto your the end of your hose. It lasts for about 12 to 15 hours. You just weigh it to figure out when you need to replace it, and it mounts right on the pole. So we thought those were pretty slick. Okay, so bins and organizing is really nice for this kind of thing. So if you can pack them in bins and if you can have checklists on your bins, it really helps too because you have so many different people that are involved in the clinic, so knowing what goes where. If you can have carts, or if the facility has carts, that can really help for the loading and unloading. Has anybody here gone on a RAVS trip? Oh, okay. Me neither. And it's like one of the things I really, really, really want to do. So RAVS is Remote Area Veterinary Services, and they are like the masters of this. These guys are just amazing. So this is one of the exam caddies from RAVS on the right-hand corner of the slide. So they're like uber organized and incredibly efficient with how they pack and unpack.
We use Pelican totes. They have wheels on them and they're waterproof. Yeah.
Those are so nice. Yeah,
They're
Tammy's got a few
expensive.
Pelican totes that she really likes. Yeah.
Baby with wheels is nice.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And handles.
Yeah, like all those little things that you might not think about when you're in a stationary clinic, and it's amazing how it changes when you do a MASH clinic, and then oh, I never thought of that, and it hits you. So like
I'm a big fan of clear bins too, because clear bins means, oh yeah, I got that tote, I got that tote.
Yeah.
I find that although the clear bins tend not to be as durable, you can at least see what you're getting, right? The black bins that are really tough and elegant stuff that's really, really tough, you're gonna leave one of those behind, I assure you.
Yeah.
You know what's in it.
Yeah.
Done that.
and then still, oh yeah,
The other thing that we do is we make sure that all of our bins have, we have notes obviously on what's in what bin, but there's different people that pack.
Yes.
It's not always the same people.
Yes.
And so we've gone through the nightmare of coming back and having broken bottles and fluid all over everything. And so now we have very specific ways of
Yeah.
packing. And we take pictures of things like our portable anesthetic machines and how they're packed.
yeah.
There's an example picture. This is
Yeah.
what it should look like, so no pieces kept up behind that.
Yeah. And that's sort of the way RAVS does things. Like RAVS has even the foams, you can tell where everything goes in each container. They do a lot of work in the Dakotas, so they have vehicles that they go in with, which allow them to do that. Which leads me to my next point, because you can have these really lovely bins, and you can think this is awesome. So on the left, this is a picture of Dr. Dam. When I did this for PowerPoint, they told me not to swear during the PowerPoint. So Dr. Stephanie Dam, and she and I and a couple other folks went to Peowanic. So we were doing an injectable contraceptive program, and it was going up the west side of James Bay, and just like Peowanic's, just like where it turns into Hudson's Bay. So anyway, we're there, we got all our stuff, we're all excited, and there's the plane, and it doesn't all fit, right? So we had to leave all of our purse, all of our clothes, and all that kind of stuff behind. We grabbed our toothbrushes, and then we grabbed all of the medical equipment and all of the donations and put it on, and we just thought we hope our clothes will follow us later. So then we got on the plane. So for starters, I showed this to somebody at work, and they're like, this guy looks really mad. He was really nice. So this was the pilot. He was actually lovely. He was not angry, even though he may look angry in that photo. But it was so interesting being on the plane. So you can see the controls, and it's like such a complicated thing, an airplane, right? But the controls, a lot of them were mechanical, and they looked super simple, and we're flying into a cloud, and you're thinking you're just hurtling through space, and you can't see where you're going, and I can't believe that's all he has to look at. So it was really interesting and a little disconcerting. And there we are, that's what we ended up with. We got there, and we had our donations, and we had our medical equipment, but we did not have our clothes with us. Similarly, when we went to another community in Northern Ontario, we had all of our bins were organized and they were labeled, and we hit the airplane, and the bins didn't fit in the airplane, right, with the cargo space that was available to us and how we'd pack. So in Pickle Lake, we're taking things out and jamming things in bags, and then you get to your destination, and all that organizing you thought you did is kind of falling apart. So being flexible is always important. Surgery tables and lights. So there's lots of options for surgery tables, and a lot of community centers have similar tables, but the height's usually not suitable. And you can put your tables on risers. Some of the other pictures shows the risers, or bed blocks, or PVC pipes, or a whole bunch of things. Sarah White, does anybody know Sarah White? Sarah White's super cool. So she works in New Hampshire and Vermont, and she does, I think they're called Spay ASAP. So she's a mobile spay-neuter vet. She published the fetal suffering article that I think you were the first person who ever gave me, the prevention of fetal suffering. That was Sarah White. But she has this countertop. It used to go over a dishwasher, and then she has these adjustable legs. So then she'll put that on top of whatever table is where she's doing her work, and then just sort of adjust it how she wants. and then her bin is her surgery tray is just the bin that she has her surgical instruments in. She also, for anybody who does any amount of surgery, she has a website called ErgoVet, which is on your resource list. That Stephanie's going to have it. So she looks at the intersection of ergonomics and veterinary medicine in a really interesting way to hopefully keep people functioning long into your careers and not sort of breaking down with mechanical illnesses of your own. I think, yes, okay. Yeah, you can see the risers down on the right-hand side. We use sort of those PVC pipes to get things elevated. Do we have a pointer or not? Okay. So it's really important to be respectful of community mores, and this is one of the first inadvertent learning. Oh no, I've actually shared a couple. This is one of the bigger inadvertent learning opportunities that I would like to share with you, in the spirit that it's always nicer to learn from somebody else's mistakes instead of making them yourself. So we went to one remote flying community. It was our very first time doing remote work. It was our first time in that community. We were really excited. We used the tables that were provided to us by the community. So we brought like picnic tablecloths and garbage bags, and we taped the tables up with it so the tables were all protected. And we scoured everything with accelerated hydrogen peroxide after we were finished, and we really cleaned up well, and like we thought we were really good guests and that we had done a good job. We did not get invited back to that community. And when we'll never really know why, but we heard through the grapevine that there were two things that probably played a role into that. One was some of the elders were really offended by tables that they used for feasts were being used for animals. And the second was we had approval from council to spay and neuter any stray dog, any free-roaming dog without identification, without a collar on it or without tags on it. So they put notifications on Facebook, and they went on the radio, and they said all this stuff. And there's this one dog that coming in and out, because we were just in a community center gymnasium, and the door was open because it was a beautiful day, so the dog was in and out all the time. So one of the vets, eventually, you know the vet too, the vet grabbed the dog and said, I'm going to neuter it, because she thought, that was consistent with the direction that we had been given by the community. She did not check with our community contact before she did that. And it turns out afterwards that wasn't own dog, and that owner did not want that dog to be neutered. So our learnings there are we now bring our own tables for surgery and prep, and we use community tables for paperwork or supplies or things of that nature, and we check in regularly with our community partners. So our goal is to keep our patients warm and to minimize post-op complications and recovery times. And a few years back, we had a spate of longer than expected recoveries that were happening in the shelters. So we sort of dove into that, and then we dove into hypothermia in more detail. And as everybody knows, you guys probably know too, as everybody knows, hypothermia can cause increased surgical wound infections. It can cause prolonged anesthetic recovery times, decreased cardiac output. But what I didn't know, and what Linda found when she looked into this, was human surgical patients report the pain of hypothermia as being worse than their surgical pain. So really can really affect the welfare of the animal throughout that. So we try to be very vigilant about it.
Do you take a microwave to warm your socks in?
That's one of the things we ask our community partners to provide is a microwave. Yeah, so we've been really lucky that we've been able to get access to it. And then we put them in like an insulated bin when they're microwaved, so they kind of stay warm and they don't cool as fast.
We found we use the medical emergency blankets around our patients as well.
Yeah.
That has really helped.
Yeah.
Since
And those
we
are
started using that,
so light
Yeah.
and foldable.
they're
Yeah.
really nice to take. So
That's a fantastic idea. We don't do that, but we should put that on our to-do list. So additional things that we found useful or just plain necessary. So a scale to weigh patients. And this scale, you can just see it in the bottom left-hand corner there. It was amazing. So we went to one community and our partner had this scale and we were all like, that's fantastic, because you can move it around. Because our medical scales in the shelters, like you nudge them and it's like, oh no, I won't work anymore. You need to get the person in to readjust me. So this thing is like you can move it around. It's got a non-skid surface. It's big enough for a dog to stand on. Got it off of Amazon, which I don't love, but it's proven to be really good for us. Anti-fatigue mats are really nice for the surgeons to stand on. Anesthetic monitoring equipment, obviously. Insulated container for your vaccines. We talked about crates before for recovering. Safety equipment, so muzzles, towels, net. Outreach environments aren't as controlled as the environments in our shelters or in our hospitals. And sometimes what can go wrong will go wrong. And sort of needing to be flexible and creative is key. So on our most recent trip, we had a couple of things happen. So we had the cats in a separate room, which was really nice, but the room was also used for storage. So they had these really big, round, heavy tables that were all stacked end on end, like a dozen of them. And that was fine, and all the cats were doing well, but one cat got out. And of course, then the cat got behind all of those tables. So she was really happy because she was hiding and she was safe, but it was really hard for us to get the cat back out
It was the
again.
last cat, honestly. Of course, above 50.
Yeah.
Above 50.
Yeah.
Got behind all the tables.
And these tables are like, my role was to have my foot against the table because they were all going to fall down if somebody didn't stand there. So we got her, and we don't really love nets. That would have been a nice place to have a net. That would have been helpful. Or having like really big towels that hadn't all been used up so that you had something nice and big to wrap her up in.
And Karen, I just want to say something to that. So, you know, in this particular case, it was close to my clinic. And remember, spacing leaders, you know, are elected procedures, right? So by the time this cat got caught, it was ramped up like you wouldn't believe. It was the end of the day. And what's our motto? Our motto is do no harm, right? So, you know, we could have plugged on and had that cat spayed, but it was the last cat of the day. We were packing up that night, going home, and that's just asking for a lot of problems. So, in a situation like that, because we were so close to the clinic, what we did was, you know, I talked to the owner and came back in, and the cat was not spayed, and said, listen, it's not in the better interest of this cat to get spayed today because well, the truth. This is what happened. You know, we had to chase the cat around the room, move things around, and you know, from a safety perspective, it's not ideal. So we said that we would honor the surgery back at the clinic, and within the week, or back to the cat on gabapentin, back in the clinic, spayed and rendered her without any issue. You know, and the risk is that we could have continued on, and bad things would have happened. It was a Sunday night, I think it was, or Saturday night.
Saturday night, yeah.
You know, no access to care afterwards, recovery. That was just asking for problems. That particular weekend, we had another cat that got loose in the other room, managed to climb a ladder and get up on the balcony. It was a neuter, chased him around the leg, chased him around the whole community center. We elected to neuter him. Right? It was a cat who we were not nearly as involved. Right? So you have to really pick your candidates wisely in a situation like that. Don't set yourself up, and don't set the pets up for failure, right?
Yeah, you have to be flexible, and you have to be willing to like change your plans on the fly. The other that was such an exciting clinic. That clinic. 'Cause I have another example from there, on which I got a picture. So one of the dogs bust out of his crate, and then we had these dividers set up. So he ended up. People were kind of like trying to wrangle him around, and then he got up against the divider, and then Dr. Hornak got on the other side of the divider and made a slip lead out of a leash and just sort of leaned over the divider and lassoed him and got him. I love those dividers. They're like essential for outreach now for me.
We had another little story like that too on our last clinic. When a dog come in end of the day, wanted to have him neutered, Harvard tested him, he was positive.
It's always the last dogs are positive. That's a guarantee.
We gave him his pro-hearts vaccines, his chip, and whatever else, dewormer. Sent him home, come back first thing in the morning, we're neuter then. He comes in when we're debriefing. The owner's carrying this dog who's in a coma, in a blanket, he's sure he's got a dead dog. We had told him to keep the dog restrained because he'd had an injection, he was Harvard positive, had to stay quiet. So we put him in a crate, dog's not used to crate. Dog gets out of crate, runs around the community all night long. It's been raining, it's really cold. He was hypothermic.
Oh,
So
dear.
I had like 20 veterinarians, it seemed like, on top of this dog, so I just backed off. Put an IV access in. We had a bear hugger donated this year from one of my equipment suppliers. Saved the dog with bear hugger and warming him, walking around by lunchtime. Sent him home, come back tomorrow to get him. Did just great.
Yeah, that's classic.
Yeah.
Okay, that one. So donations are really nice too. So if you have access to donated product, and that's pretty frequent for us as shelters, and sometimes we get so much stuff donated, it's like redistributing it becomes a problem. So if it's stuff that's usable and in good working condition, it can be really nice to bring. So donated pet food is usually appreciated. Check with the community first, right, to make sure that they have the ability to redistribute it or can store it if they can't redistribute it right away. What we brought a lot of last time, which I really liked, was the cat carriers, because previously we'd been bringing cardboard boxes, which are less than ideal for cats that are ramped up too. So it was really nice to be able to have secure carriers for people to either take or to transfer cats into if needed. Extra leashes and collars, things like that. Okay, so I know some people use ProHeart, Linda and Tammy. Anybody else using ProHeart in the room? Okay, we have a love affair with ProHeart. If you give enough notice, a lot of companies will support outreach clinics. They just need a fair bit of notice. And Zoetis is really generous with the ProHeart. I was going to talk a little bit about it, but Linda already did, so we can move past that. Protocols is actually pretty easy. You should adhere to the same protocols you would at your regular clinic, right? I mean, just because we're delivering services in the community doesn't mean that we're going to be doing it any less safely, any differently. So surgery techniques, patient selection, disinfection and sterilization of equipment are all the same. The one thing that might change is your analgesia and anesthesia, because you just want to make sure your protocols are adapted for same day going home. Right? So if you have something where you're keeping them overnight at your clinic, you might want to just adjust that. Medical record keeping, same requirements. And that part's really important too, because you want to be sure for continuity of care that you have the ability to pass along those medical records to clients when they ask, so that their next veterinarian can see them. Flow, so usually the vet and tech get together and talk it out and set up the flow. It's nice if you can try to keep flows similar so that your work habits continue to function, but it's never going to be ideal, right? Because of windows and doors and electrical outlets and all those other things. So you're always going to be adjusting things a little bit. So for us here, you can see the prep area. So this is the cat beach. Oh, Jade, you're in front. So there's the cat beach, and just behind the beach you can see animals being prepped for surgery, and the other picture is just looking at it from the other angle, so animals being prepped for surgery, nobody's on the beach right there, and you can see surgery up in the back. So that was actually a nice sort of, that had a nice little flow of that clinic, the way it was set up. It's ideal if you can see venues before you go there, but depending on the location, sometimes you can't. So then you just have to have conversations and like photos and things like that to figure things out. So what happens when you go home? Just like with any kind of clinic, you need a plan for post-op care and emergencies, all right? Sometimes that might just be a phone number that's carried by your outreach staff so that they can answer it, they can triage things and direct people as needed. It could go directly to your hospital if you're like Grand River and you're really close to that clinic. If you're not, then you need to be making arrangements with other clinics in the area because often you may be too far away. It is important to set policies in advance as to how you're going to handle that. So if they're going to be going to see another clinic, are you going to be reimbursing the costs of that? And that's relatively standard for most high volume, high quality spay-neuter clinics if it is a surgical problem. That is related to the surgery that you did, but you just need to figure that out in advance and communicate that clearly to people. When we think about support between clinics, it's going to vary because different communities have different needs, and support's going to be based on conversations with that community. So it could be things like pet food, leashes and collars, cages and crates, so just sort of supply type things. It might be telemedicine. That could be simple stuff like renewing flea, tick, and heartworm prevention for people, or it could be more complex for new medical problems. It could be owned animal veterinary care. So Tammy sees her clients in between clinics at her spot. We've certainly seen clients at THS in between outreach clinics as well. And some folks will drive a surprising distance to access care. I think particularly now when it's so hard to find veterinary care, we've had people that will happily jump in the car and drive a few hours for us to be able to take a look at their pet. Assistance of transferring, like if your shelter has medical capacity, there's different ways to do that too. So you may do owned animal care for things that can be done on an outpatient basis, or sometimes you'll admit an animal into your system with the intent of returning it to that owner once it's stable. For things like fractures, trauma, maybe spaying and neutering cats and dogs after their litters are weaned, that kind of thing. So just think about it in advance. This one is really easy. It's the same. It doesn't vary. So our professional obligations and regulatory requirements are the same whether we are in our shelter or whether we're practicing in an outreach clinic. You have to have a VCPR. You must obtain informed client consent. You have to have appropriate medical records. And you need to share those records promptly with other people when requested. Unlike poor Jason, who gets emergencies with no records. So this part is confusing, accreditation. So I hope I can simplify it, and it's going to vary on where you're doing your outreach and whether you're going to be doing wellness or doing surgery. So when you go on the website, I actually find it a little bit confusing on the CVO website, but Anita Bargi, the principal of accreditation, was really helpful in answering my questions, and she has said that if anybody has questions, just to direct them to her, and she'd be happy to chat. So this is my understanding. I don't think I've made any mistakes, and I did ask Anita to check my work, but if there is a mistake there, it's mine. So the first type is companion animal mobile, and that's what you would need to do. I'm sorry, Gabrielle, because this has nothing to do with you guys. This is like, if you came to be with us, this is what would happen. So companion animal mobile is what you need to do a wellness clinic in the same geographic area as your shelter or your companion animal hospital. So that would be like if you were going to do a clinic in a venue like a homeless shelter or community center in your own town. A companion animal mobile office is a larger sort of RV type vehicle that's got hot and cold running water. It's got confinement space inside for the animals. It's got a space for the vet to provide services, and then you do the services out of the vehicle. So what about mobile spay-neuter clinics, like your SNP truck? So that is, the current accreditation model doesn't have a classification for that. And for folks who don't know, the CVO is actually looking at accreditation through a different lens. And they use a lot more words, but my understanding is it's going to be more like a la carte, where you're going to say, these are the different services I'm going to be providing, and then they'll say, well, these are the pieces that you need for it. But right now, because there's not a category for spay-neuter vehicle, the vet needs to apply for a dual accreditation. So you need a companion animal spay-neuter clinic and a companion animal mobile, and then you make exemption requests. So there are things that wouldn't apply, like bathrooms or a waiting room or things like that. For remote clinics, that's a whole different one again, and for that you get the remote area companion animal mobile. And that can be accredited on its own, or it can be accredited with your companion animal hospital. If you want to do surgery as well as wellness, you again need to ask for an exemption. So the process for requesting the exemption is they come in, they inspect you for whatever your accreditation is. After that inspection has been done, then you request for the exemption. There's a form that you fill out. It goes to the accreditation committee's next meeting, and the committee thinks about it and decides whether they want to let you do it. It's helpful if you give them lots of information so that they can make the decision. So these are the kinds of questions that they would like to see when they're considering the request for exemption. So what communities do you plan to serve? So really, like, where is your remote unit going to be? Who are the proposed target communities? What is the scope of services that you want to be doing? It's going to be very different if you're going to be doing surgery like a spay versus a wellness clinic. And this is a really big piece for them. They really want to understand what is the access to follow-up or emergency care related to the services that you're going to be providing. So if you lay all of that out, the accreditation committee takes a look at it and then gives you the exemption. And I think, Tammy, you were the first person to start down that road. So Tammy actually went and saw council and sort of made a presentation and got them to really kind of think about things a little bit differently and opened up the opportunities for more people. Oh no, that not the remote. That was for the more local ones that aren't as remote.
Hey guys. So many of you actually already do outreach, so maybe this will be more commiseration than a lot of stories. But I started going out on the outreach clinics as kind of an administrative role, because that's the unfun part of the clinics that of course we all have to do. So we're just going to go over some administrative learnings and lessons and oopsies that we've made. So keeping in mind that when you're in a regular clinic, you have a team that you work with regularly, you're all trained in the same way, you all know where everything is. But in outreach clinics, even if you have a really stable volunteer base that you're constantly accessing and using, That doesn't mean that all those volunteers have worked together. That doesn't mean the same ones are going to go on the trip. And that doesn't mean that every community is going to be the same and have the same flow or even have the same donated products. So one of the things that we always do is have a pre-clinic huddle to be able to talk about all that kind of stuff. You can go over the form. Where do the stickers go? Where does the consent go? How do we check off, what services the individuals need? It's also a great time to go over the roles that everybody's going to play. Maybe when you go on one clinic, you are part of the recovery team. Maybe on another clinic that you go on, you're part of the intubation team. So by the time that you arrive in a clinic, you might not even know what role you're going to play or what is going to be expected of you. So it's a great time to clarify your role and know what everybody else is doing, what their names are, and who you can go to. So for our clinics, when we go out, they always do heartworm testing before they get to the table. And so knowing where you can get your heartworm test once it's ready, what table to go to, who to go to, all that kind of stuff is really important. And we've found that when we do pre-clinic meetings where all the volunteers are there, because sometimes you have people arrive staggered, right? Like sometimes everyone arrives the day before, sometimes you have people arriving the morning of. And when we do pre-clinic meetings on the day when everyone is there, things run much more smoothly. Everybody's on the same page, and it's not only does it make the clinic run more smoothly, but it also really empowers the volunteers to feel like they have the information and skill to do what you like. And it also avoids all of the questions coming to the person who organized the clinic. I know when sometimes we go on clinics, poor Tammy is inundated with questions from people. What do I do? Where do I sign? Do I need to sign here? Do I need to do this? And so having that pre-clinic huddle can at least minimize the amount of those questions so that everyone has most of the answers. So it's a great time for people to also ask questions. So one of the things that Karen talked about was, a lot of the administrative requirements are the same in your clinic, but what works in your clinic might not work on a MASH clinic. So things that are important to keep in mind is ownership and files. So some of the clinics we go to have Wi-Fi, some of them have Wi-Fi, and some of them don't have any Wi-Fi whatsoever. So are your files going to be electronic? Are they going to be just in file folders? How are you going to handle that? How are you going to handle ownership? Sometimes the ownership of the dogs that are there is really different than the patients that are coming into your regular clinic. You have a limited pharmacy, obviously. Anything that you packed and thought that you need and forgot is going to be there, and you're going to have to work with that. And that might be even products that not all the vets that are volunteering or all the RVTs that are volunteering are familiar with. So another great thing to touch on in the pre-clinic round. You're going to be working with unfamiliar coworkers and processes, which I'm sure you guys all do. Everyone has a slightly different way of doing things, so just being prepared for that and being able to work with others who might have different processes than you. And obviously the speed that you're doing. You're not doing maybe 1 or 2 spays or neuters. You're doing it all day. So one of the things that is really different about the files in an outreach clinic compared to a regular clinic is some of the ownership that's there. So for instance, sometimes we'll have a scenario where there'll be multiple people that live in a household. They all own the dog's the family dog, and that's probably the most similar to kind of what you'd see in a clinic, right? You might have dad, mom, kids, and if you have a electronic file system that allows you to store multiple names, that's great. You can look up any name and find the animal, find their medical record. But if you're not using, if you're using actual file folders and you have to look them up by their last name, that's a great opportunity to correspond with your community representative. They know most of the community members. So if you can't find the file, it's a great time to talk to the group or to talk to your community representatives so that you can find the appropriate file. I know that Tammy and Jen were telling stories of one community that they had where some of the files became quite chaotic and under different names, and they spent years trying to like consolidate that back and then trying to go and find that record. And you're in a remote community, so you can't necessarily just go through your shelves and find that information. You know, did they have a heartworm test last spring? Did they have vaccinations? The other thing that you might have is you might have one person calling and booking in 3 dogs. They don't actually own all 3 dogs. They're calling because they were calling to book their dog, so they're just calling to also book their aunt's dog and also book their neighbor's dog and so on, right? Like, so because some of the communities can be really tight-knit, you might not know that that was a file that you should bring. So having a plan to prepare for that. So is your booking document, is that a question that you're asking? Making sure that it's the owner that's actually booking the animal, or that you get the owner's name so that you can bring the file, and just having a plan to deal with the fact that you might not have access to those records, or that it might not have been the owner associated with the dog. And then the last one was actually one at Bay Soleil that was, I think, the most noteworthy one, where we had quite a few dogs that were owned by multiple households. So there was a dog, and sometimes it visited one house, and sometimes it visited another. Sometimes it slept at one, sometimes it slept at another. And being able to having a plan about how you're going to approach that. So instead of emphasizing that it needed to be under one ownership and that one person needed to be the owner for the record to go under, having a way to plan for that in a really sensitive, community-minded way. We need, either explaining like, well, we need a name to put the file under, so maybe we'll make a hybrid name. Maybe you can agree on a name to put the file under just to make it easy for us to find the file again. So having just preparation for some sort of situation so that you don't end up with 2.
If I had to go back and do it again, I have thousands of medical records now. I would organize it by microchip number. All our pets get microchip, so that way it wouldn't matter what the spellings of the names were, where there were locations where it would all be under microchip numbers, even in the file folders. I mean, it's something that it would take me a century to go back and try to fix that now. But if that's something you guys are getting into, everything should be microchip anyways. You're going to file them under the microchip number, and then it doesn't matter. The drawback will become, it's not uncommon for us to have to re-microchip pets for whatever reason. So you just have to be on top of that. But either way, it doesn't matter because you've got the microchip number, and that means everything. It'll be that, and with your name backup, of course, because again, if the microchip doesn't work or you can't find it, then you just got to name backup. The number is by far.
Yeah, we have a searchable database with the microchip, so when we run into that, I can just search on the computer, and that's helped us a few times.
Right. And then as well as using the microchip number in other aspects, so heartworm testing, then the microchip number goes on the blood vial, so then it's documented as the microchip number with pet's name. So if someone calls throughout the year and reference back, I can't find the file, I get the heartworm log out, find the microchip number, and then see who the pet was registered under at the clinic, go back and find the file. So that microchip number
Is everything.
is everything.
Yeah, exactly. One of the other new things that we had come up with pretty recently was having a booking document. So previously there was a lot of correspondence between the community representative and us to figure out how many animals were booked, how many spays, how many neuters, how many, etc. We would have to, obviously the client would have to write out all of their information every time that we came for consent, and sometimes it's difficult to read their different people's handwriting and so on. So what we started doing was a shared Excel document where the community representative could put all of that information into an Excel document. And the great thing about it was not only did we, initially I think we did it mostly for counts. We initially were mostly interested in knowing just how many were coming. But the added benefit of that is that we had their breed, so we also had an idea of what sizes to expect when we were deciding what medications to bring, so we could bring the most relevant sizes. If we have a lot of Shih Tzus or if we have a lot of Huskies, we have an idea of what to do. But the other benefit of it was that we had all their information already. So if someone forgot to write down their phone number, we can still register their microchip instead of having to chase them down afterward to find a phone number because it's not on the form, or we can't read the 4 or the 9 that they've written down. We're also able to automate making stickers. So instead of the owners or us having to write out everybody's information, for however many dogs we do that day. We can just print stickers. So we can put a sticker on their consent form, we can put a sticker on their surgical record, we can put a sticker on their vaccine record. Like all of the things that we no longer have to write between all of them. And we plan staggered intake times, so it gives us a good idea of who's coming when. Did they show up yet? Are they late? Should we call them to make sure that they're on their way? So it gives us all that kind of information. Before that, we had lots of times people would forget to put the color of their pet, and sometimes you would catch it in the middle of a clinic and you could like write it in for them. But I registered a lot of brown cats and brown dogs. So if they show up at a clinic and they're a white dog or a orange cat, yeah. So it gives us all that kind of stuff to be able to prepare for the community and get the completeness. So this is an example of the forms that we actually use. They're one page, the consent is on the front, and all of the monitoring information is on the back. And we use the preclinic meeting to explain how to fill it out and so on. But it's really easy for something really simple to cause a lot of complication. For example, people were bringing, we always scan for microchips at the beginning of the clinic. And so if they didn't have a microchip, I was writing no chip because they didn't have one. So they should get one. And then all of a sudden somebody else was putting needs chip, right? So when they went to go do surgery, they were coming up and asking, if it says no chip, does that mean that the owner doesn't want a chip? Did they not consent to a chip? And it wasn't something that we had talked about or discussed how to communicate that. Since then, we all talked about exactly how to word that. Same thing with checking off the checklist of what to need. Do you circle it? Do you check it off? If it's checked off, does that mean it's already done? And so we've had clinics before where maybe there's been confusion around how to check that off or how to circle it if it's not talked about beforehand. So doing all those things can create a lot more clarity during a clinic and stop some of those questions. And that's an example of our wellness bag. So the place for all the stickers to go, and making the stickers beforehand can minimize the amount that you have to actually write out. And it also gives a visual cue, so you can glance at it and see the reds. You know it's a rabies sticker. You see a sticker for a negative 40X test and for a ProHeart, and you can immediately know if the pet has already received that service or not without having to kind of read through a lot of scrawl. So that's all the information on the administrative stuff.
So who here has done the Indigenous Canada course? And what did you guys think?
I loved it.
Yeah. I felt like I learned a lot from it. So this is a massive online open course from the University of Alberta. It's free. They say it takes about 12 weeks, but you just kind of do it at your own pace. So I found I learned a ton from that. And I think just all Canadians should take it, but particularly if you're going to be doing the work with First Nations folks, I think it's really important. How about the Vancouver Humane Society Trauma-Informed and Culturally Safe Training? What did you think?
Really good.
Yeah, I did one of their webinars before they launched the training, and I haven't done the training, but I've been impressed by how much thoughtfulness has been put into it. I know some of the people that were involved in making it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really good.
Beautiful. So another, I think, strong recommendation for anybody working in sheltering and community medicine, just because we work with so many different vulnerable populations. And then the final one for me, has anybody read this book? This is amazing. Okay, I'm gonna really recommend this one. Okay, dang it. I'm gonna really recommend this one really fast. What Happened to You? Which is, you just freaked me out. Conversations of Trauma, Resilience, and Healing. So it's Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, who is a brain and trauma expert, and they just sort of flip things around. So instead of like, what's wrong with you? It's more about like what happened to you, and really sort of understanding why people behave the way they do behave, and how we can all work with each other. It's also available as an audiobook for free from the library. It's narrated by Oprah and Dr. Perry with interview clips. If you like audiobooks, if you like drive to work or ride your bike or whatever, it's really good. How about Adam Grant? Anybody love Adam Grant? Thank you. I really like Adam Grant. So he is an organizational psychologist, and he talks a lot about rethinking. So I just want to quote from his website quickly. Intelligence is usually seen as the ability to think and learn, but in a rapidly changing world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more, the ability to rethink and unlearn. In our daily lives, too many of us favor the comfort of conviction over the discomfort of doubt. We listen to opinions that make us feel good instead of ideas that make us think hard. We see disagreement as a threat to our egos rather than an opportunity to learn. We surround ourselves with people who agree with our conclusions when we should be gravitating to those who challenge our thought process. So I think he's a super interesting guy. And in the spirit of rethinking, I want to just float a few things for people to think about. So when we think about geographically remote communities, our current model of provision of veterinary care is still very colonial and very reliant upon outsiders coming into communities at intervals to deliver care. And I would argue that the dog population problems faced in a lot of remote communities are really the result of colonization. So if we want improved animal welfare, if we want safer communities, improved public health, our wellness and spay-neuter clinics really meeting that in a sustainable way for both the people delivering services as well as the people in the communities? Or could we think about ways that communities could be supported to do some of this work themselves? So one thing that I really think is worthy of consideration is lay vaccinators. Sorry, I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff now. And in September 2021, the Companion Animal Health Institute, in partnership with Veterinarians Without Borders, hosted a collaborative event for World Rabies Day, and they brought together a whole bunch of different people to talk about rabies and about lay vaccinator programs. So that's in your resource list as well. That's a recorded webinar, and they also have a document that they prepared. And then if you had a robust training and certification program for lay vaccinators, and there were engaged communities that had successful community-driven lay vaccinator programs, my next thing that I think would be incredibly cool is to think of them more as community animal health workers and to think about things like injectable contraception. So for anybody here who knows Dr. Judith Sampson French, she's from Alberta. She has a charity called Dogs with No Names, and she's been working with, she's a passionate advocate for this and has been working with injectable contraceptives for many years. So for her, this is licensed for male dogs, but she actually uses it in female dogs. And she finds after about 2 weeks, they have a contraceptive effect, and it lasts sort of 22 to 24 months. Has anybody used injectable contraception here? They're doing some work with it right now in Manitoba as well, and that was the trip that I went on in Peawanuck with Dr. Dam.